How do you remodel your kitchen after the cabinets and flooring have been devastated by flooding caused by leaking pipes? I will show you how we transformed this old 1970s style kitchen from a water-damaged engineering disaster and into this stunning modern kitchen with a new large kitchen island and bar. We'll also show you rookie DIY mistakes to avoid and cool technologies on the granite counters. So this is what we were met with when we arrived. So our friend who had the flooded kitchen already had the laminate flooring removed and had also removed the base cabinets as well, because they were Formica and had soaked up all of the water and just disintegrated. They were ruined beyond repair. They weren't sure what to do about the upper cabinets. They were thinking of maybe keeping them, and I said, you know what, if you're getting new cabinets, just replace both of them, have them match, and finally get rid of these outdated cabinets and move into the 21st century. So we finally teamed up and we unscrewed all of the cabinets, got them off of the wall, and you can see the holes left behind by the previous installers as they tried to locate the studs. Well, folks, you know, sometimes life throws curveballs at you that you never saw coming. So our friend Larry, he's the one that called me in to come and do this project here. Sadly, he passed away just a few months after we completed this. So I showed you those high-speed time-lapse scenes of us tearing down the old cabinets. But I wanted to show you our friend Larry here, slow it down a little bit so you could see who he was as a remembrance to him. So as I slow it down for you, you can see there's Larry there in the suspenders and the mustache. And he actually helped us out on the demo day there, which was pretty cool. And look, you can even see there he's got a cut on his elbow there. He took one for the team. Way to go, Larry. And, you know, Larry was a Vietnam veteran. He served his country, and then he served his community as a mounted police officer for Pompano Beach Police in Florida. And then after that, he served as Lord in the Gideon's International, spreading the gospel, and now he is living with his Lord. So rest in peace, Larry, and we hope that one day we can also join you up there as well. Here I'm using my DeWalt chipping hammer, which makes great work of this tile removal. It always makes me mad when I see those DIY shows on TV where they smash up the cabinets because it looks good for TV, but we like to reuse them. We usually put them on Craigslist and sell them to other people that could find a use for them so they don't get thrown into the dump. And then here you can see I'm cutting away the drywall from where the backsplash was so we can replace it with the Schluter-Curdy panel boards that we're going to use to tile on. And here I'm pulling off the old side drywall from the window, because all the way around the window we're going to be putting all brand new tile and a new granite countertop, including replacing the one on the outside of the patio, that ugly brown one you saw there. That's going bye-bye. And you can see the lame job that most builders do down here with the window side or intrusion. And once I have the drywall off, I always like to photograph all of my switches and wires and everything so I can see where they are going. And then you can see here, I mark it on the top on the drywall there so I know exactly where there's cords so we won't drive any screws through them later on. So here I am installing the Schluter-Curdy panels, and I love these because they're so light and they're foam with basic grid lines on there to help you line up the tile up to these very easily. Boards and very easy to work with and to cut. And so now I'm installing the Curdy bands, and this is what you use here for the seams between the backer boards. So whenever we're tiling, we typically do this. So I figured, hey, we'll just do it here too in the kitchen up against the drywall. I always photograph all of the pipes and any of the other electrical lines that are running through there so we can see exactly where everything is once we put the walls back up later on for reference. Now we have the walls are all patched up here. We are ready to start installing the upper cabinets, and we'll start with the big corner piece right up there. Okay, now we have our self-leveling laser set up here, and I'm adjusting that vertical laser beam there to line up with my screws that are going through the stud. So I know there's a stud right there, 22 inches to the right of the wall. So we have that laser line that goes all the way up. Now when we go to mount our cabinet and we stick it up on our ledger boards that we're going to install here, we'll be able to tell exactly, boom, where to put the screw so that we will be guaranteed to hit that stud. So now we've attached our two ledger boards here, and you can see the laser line goes right directly across both of them. And then I'll put the spirit level on there to make sure that it's perfectly level between the two boards. Because when we set our cabinet down on top of this ledger board, it's got to be perfectly level, and I do mean perfect. Let me see if we can see the bubble. Yeah. Then likewise, we have another laser beam going here, 22 inches to the left of the wall, and it's going straight up where we have the blue tape. And right there, you can actually see the previous hole in the wall from the previous installation. So we know they guessed at least that screw correctly hit the stud. Now we're ready to mount the cabinet. We hang the upper cabinets first, and we always start with the corner piece because that's the most important one that must be level, plumb, and true, and all of the other cabinets line up from that one. And here's a good vindication of how level we were, because if you look, the bottom of the laser is going all the way across the bottom of the cabinet here. So here you know we'd got that nice and accurate there. So now, because of the change in the cabinet heights, everything's going up a little bit. And so since this outlet used to be inside the old cabinet, which came down like 6 more inches, this is the bottom of our new microwave cabinet. So we have to shift the outlet up, and I calculated it's got to come up to here. The wood frame along the bottom of the microwave cabinet runs here, and you got to give it a little bit of space so we can cut through the backboard, and the outlet will land right here. So this is where we're going to move it to from here. Now you can see before here they had no outlet box, and I always like to have an outlet box. And since this is a metal box, we got to make sure we bond it to ground as well when we connect everything up. And here's the outlet installed and moved up so that it is now mounted above where the frame will be. And you can see this is done textbook here. You got a metal outlet box here, and it's bonded to the ground. So the ground wire that comes up in there, as you can see, goes right there to that green ground screw. And then we have a green pigtail. This will be our ground now for the outlet. And I'm using my Wago connectors just because the wires were so short coming in. So here's one for the black wire, the line, and another one here for the white wire, the neutral. And then there it is, all patched up. Then we went up the street for some lunch to take a quick lunch break. Now, to make the cutout for our outlet box, I always start with 4 tiny pilot holes from the back side. Then I come back around to the front side and make those holes even bigger so that I can fit my jigsaw in there, or that you can also start off with the oscillating multi-tool if you so decide. I chose to go with the multi-tool route at the end here. Now we simply cut a little hole, and don't worry about that little scrape there in the lower right, because everything's going to be covered by the outlet plate. And here's a great tip for you newbie beginning DIYers. So I prefer to always make my upper cabinets down on the floor. I usually put 3 or 4 together. We screw them all together, make sure they're level, plumb, true, and no lippage between them. And then we lift the entire apparatus up as one unit, so they're all perfect. Don't ever do them one by one. And of course the level is showing the row of cabinets is perfectly level. But even better than that, the self-leveling laser is lined up on the bottom edge of the cabinet. This way you know it's perfectly level across the 3 cabinet boxes. Now we start working on our over the refrigerator cabinet, and so we have the ledger boards installed, and look at the left, we also have an inch thick panel. Those are nice too. It's almost required for holding it, for giving it support. So you see how the box goes up against it there, and it also gives a nice delineation against the cabinets. It's really a very classy look to your kitchen, instead of just having your refrigerator sticking out in view next to the cabinet. And now I'm sanding down all of the drywall mud where the seams were, make sure everything's nice and flat. And you always want to paint your drywall. Yeah, you never want to leave blank drywall. And we always prime it before we paint. Paper can soak up moisture over time, moisture in the air. You should always paint behind your cabinets first. Don't ever commit this common DIY newbie mistake. And here it is, all nicely painted. Now we can start to line up all of the base cabinets. So this is the point now where most DIYers make the hugest mistakes, and I want to show you how to properly level your base cabinets, because they have to be flat and level. Otherwise, when they go to put the granite on there, it's going to crack. So I just want to take a few minutes to review this with you folks, because it's so important, and this is where everybody drops the ball, even professionals, but especially rookie DIYers. So here in the United States, your cabinets here have a height of about 34.5 inches to the top surface of your cabinet, to that top edge. Sometimes it's 34 5/8, but it's usually right around there. And then your counter will go on top of that, and your counter is 1.5 inches thick. So the top surface of your counter should now be 36 inches above the finished floor. And then from there, you have an 18-inch backsplash to the bottom edge of your upper cabinets, right? So now your upper cabinets should start 54 inches from the floor. So if you were making marks up your wall, that's what you would do here to make sure everything lines up. So when you see all of those videos from Lowe's and Home Depot and other online so-called experts that show your cabinet installation, you know, they're dealing with a perfectly flat, level floor. All the walls are perfectly 90 degrees. Everything's level, plumb, true, perfectly square. It's like you're at Disney World and you're in La La Land. So I have a news flash for you folks. It's all one big fraud, because nothing ever works out like you see on those 2-minute videos on Home Depot and Lowe's. Because in the real world, folks, you and I don't have a perfectly flat kitchen floor. This is more like what your floor is. Now, this is exaggerated, but look, everybody's floor, even if it's concrete or whether it's wood, it has these little natural dips and peaks and valleys. Even if you have concrete floor and it looks flat to your eye, put a 6-foot level down. Level, it's actually slightly sloped, and it could be 1/4 of an inch over 6 feet. It could be sloped downward this way or sloped downward this way. So these are your 3 typical floors that you might actually see. So a lot of the rookie mistakes that are made even by professional installers is they just throw their base cabinets down on the kitchen floor there and expect everything to work out perfectly for them, and then they start running into all sorts of troubles. So like this is some of the troubles you could have here. Like if you were just to put them down a sloping floor, you can see you'll have lippage along the top edge. Okay, so how do we avoid this then? So this is what I want you to do. I want you to go and get a yardstick, and we're going to call this our story stick because we're going to figure out what our storyline is here for these cabinets. So you put your yardstick right up against the cabinet, and we're going to mark a line on the yardstick as to the height of the cabinet. So that's what we have right here. See, so there's our storyline, and in this case, it's our cabinet height, which would be 34.5 to 34 5/8. Now, I know in the kitchen that we're in today, it's 34 5/8. So what I want you to do then here is our goal is to find the highest point on the floor, because that is our limiting factor. So here's what you do then. We know what our cabinet height is. See over on the far right, and it's 34 5/8. So you set your laser line on the wall, or in the old days, they used to draw a chalk line, or you can just draw a line. I highly suggest you use a laser. You set it at that height, 34 5/8. So then you take your story stick over here and you stick it on the floor and you move it across the floor. And our goal is to find out where is the peaks and valleys in the floor. Now, you would have drywall here, of course, and this laser line right here sort of shows where it would go. So your goal is right here. You know, if you sit the story stick down on the floor, the line is going to perfectly line up to your laser right there. So then you just move it across the floor through your laser line, and you want to find out where is your highest point. As you're dragging your story stick across the floor, you're going to find out, like if I have a high point over here, what's going to happen is the story stick will rise up above the line. So now our 34 5/8 inch mark on the story stick is now above the laser line. That's a problem, because that now means that all of the other cabinets that you thought were going to be at this height, this one's going to be sticking up. Well, how do we mitigate that? Very simple. So this gives you a better at a glance of what's going on. So we know that over here, see how the blue line on the stick matches the laser, so everything's fine there. Now watch what happens right here. You start to dip down, and now look, the storyline drops below the laser line. Is that good or bad? That's okay, because all you would have to do here is shim up your cabinet. That's not a problem. Now watch here, we're still below the line, and watch what happens as we get over here. Boom. You start to hit a point where now, okay, we're right at the exact point there where it matches. That's not a big deal. But the floor is rising here, and now look, and it's exaggerated, but I'm just here to show you that you can see your line on the story stick is way above the laser at this point, and if you were to put a cabinet right here, it would stick way up high above the other ones, and you can't lower this cabinet to meet the level of the other ones. This is where your problem comes from here. So how do we get around this? Well, this is why I said you find the highest point on the floor, and then you do this. You move your laser line up to here, so this is now your storyline. So now, no matter where I put a cabinet, I know that I'm guaranteed that it's going to be below this line, and that's where you want it to be, so that you want the upper edges of all of your cabinets to line up to this storyline now. So this is it here. This was your old line height, and this is your new height. And here's my group of cabinets. See, so now the tops of them will all line up. You can see how that works out now. See that? So before, if I left that laser line at that lower setting, look at this. I could put all my cabinets here on the right, but this one here is bumping into the side of the hill there, and now you're in trouble. So by raising it up to that highest point, everything else will now match along like this. But now look, you have gaps on the floor. So what's going to happen now is you're going to have different sized shims for depending on how deep your dip is on the floor. See, this one's a little shorter here. It's getting a little shorter there. This shim here is even smaller. And then finally, by the time you get to this last one here, you'll be looking at a much smaller shim size. See, so this is how it should work out for you. So you're going to have to individually shim up these base cabinets to get them all to be at that same height right there. And this is how you do that storyline. If you fail to do this, folks, prepare to fail in your installation. If you want to be a smarty and you think you're going to ignore what I just told you here in the last couple of minutes, you're going to set yourself up for failure. So what I've done is I've set my self-leveling laser here at 34 5/8 inches. That's the very top of the cabinet here, as you can see, off the finished floor. And so I've got my little line here drawn on the story stick at 34 5/8 inches. And so that's where the laser is going to hit on that line. See that? This is a self-leveling laser. So this one's level here with this one. I don't feel any lippage between the two. We're okay. However, something is starting to happen here, folks, because look what happens over here. What's happening here? Why don't I see that green laser on the back wall? That's because as we start to head this way towards the left, the laser beam is starting to drop down and down and a little bit more. So that says to me that the floor is uneven here. The floor is actually increasing. It's ramping up as we move down to the left here. Look right here. By the time we get to here, we're a little bit over 1/8 of an inch below the bottom of the top. And remember, the laser is level. These guys are not. It's the floor that is out of level here. And so this part is up higher than the right-hand side over by the Lazy Susan. So this is the mistake that people make, is they find themselves in a bind. What do I do? Now we're going to have uneven heights. And then by the time we get all the way down here to this cabinet, you can see it's continuing here, and then we'll have a space here moved over for the dishwasher. But by the time you get down to this cabinet right here, you can see that it's down to about 1/4 of an inch off the top level of the cabinet. So this means that right here the floor is about 1/4 of an inch higher than it is in the other corner where the Lazy Susan is. So I always start in the corner, and it's usually the Lazy Susan was where we start, because this has to be your cornerstone piece, the reference for the whole row. But then you also have to make sure that the whole row is at the same height. So because of that 1/4 inch difference down there, we're going to have to raise this 1/4 of an inch. So by raising this 1/4 of an inch, and we will bring up now the laser with us, that will adjust our storyline so that now the tops of all of these will be. We take our story stick flat on the floor, right up against it, so that we know we're measuring at that right height, that correct height. This is 34 5/8 inches right there. So now we just have the line going across there. That is our storyline now. That is the height, the 34 5/8 inches of our cabinet. And we're going to go all the way across the wall against the laser line and make sure that we're at that height. So we're starting here on the right side of the wall, and I've got my story sticks. Remember that line that we made? And we have the laser set at 34 5/8 inches off the ground. So we're starting now. There's our reference, and everything matches. You can see the laser lines up to the line there. See that? There's my line. Once I straighten up my story stick, boom, we're completely flat right there. There's our reference. So there we know everything's jiving. And our goal now is to move this stick down the wall to wherever we can get a good laser line there, and just make sure that the laser is always in line with this. Now if the laser dips below this line, we're in trouble, because that means the floor is sloping. That means we're going to have to jack up the laser line in order to give us the proper clearance. If we come over here, we can see the laser line has now fallen below our story line of 34 5/8 inches off of the finished floor. So that means what was level on the other side of the room, once we get over to here on the left, it's starting to get lower and lower, which means the floor is coming up at this point. The floor is sloping upward, and we're going to run out of space. So when we look at the laser on this side, you can see it on the cabinet. the laser is not touching the top of the cabinet over here. And that's a problem. It's missing it by about 1/8 of an inch. So we're going to be off. So what we're going to have to do then is we have to raise our laser 1/8 of an inch to meet the top of the cabinet here now in this storyline. And that means that all of the cabinets this way on the right hand side of the wall going back over this way, they're all going to have to get shimmed up 1/8 of an inch in order to meet this new height of the storyline. So you don't just come in and slap all of your cabinets down on the floor and expect them to all be in a straight level line across the tops. That's not going to happen. You have to make that happen. And if you don't make that happen, the granite will not lay flat on the top and the granite will crack. Okay, so now that we've added the shims to the back sides, we have 2 there and 2 there on the Lazy Susan. I have another one back here, and I've got 2 more back over here in order to make sure that now the thing is at the right height and that it is flat and level here. So here we go. With our 2-footer, you can see we're nice and level here, no matter what direction we go in. And then, of course, looking at the 6-foot level, you can see going all the way across to the next units down, we're completely perfectly in the middle here. So this is now completely floating off the floor on shims and with blocks back here, with the backing blocks attached to the wall, and it is now rock solid, and we can now raise our laser level to meet the new top height of this cabinet. Here it is right here. Now watch that laser beam as it comes all the way up and starts to split and show up on the back there. It's like the sunrise. So I'm going to lock it in place right there, and it's self-leveling, and as you can see, it's perfect there on both sides of that Lazy Susan. So now that we want to make sure we're progressing down the line, here's our laser, and you can see it's nice and flat along the top. I have this next cabinet down clamped together with the Lazy Susan, and you make sure you rub your finger across the top, no lippage, and then all the way down that seam there. It should look like a hairline and nothing more, and you don't want to feel any lippage. So everything's clamped. So now what I'm going to do is take my first drill and drill my pilot hole, and it has to go, look at the length, you see the length? It's going to go through the first one and slightly into the second one. You don't want it going all the way through. And you do this to prevent it from cracking, because this is very expensive hardwood and you don't want it to crack. See, it's even hard to drill through it. So there was my pilot hole. Now I'm going to drill my countersink right here, because I'm using a deck screw, a gray deck screw to match this. So there is our countersink hole. Gray deck screw, and see how long it is? It's going to go just partially in to the frame, just enough to grab it and do its job. See that? So nice and tight in there, and then I'll make sure this is adjusted, because I feel a little lippage here, and then we'll put the second screw here, the third screw here. I usually try to hide them behind the hinge. So here's the hole for where they hang the door, and I'll put it right up in here just above it so it gets hidden by the hinge. Installing the microwave oven is best done with 2 people. Okay, now this right here is another classic mistake. So can you tell what's wrong here by looking at this? Do you know what's wrong there? What's wrong with that picture? So the problem here is when they wired this up here, you see that black wire? The loop is going the wrong way around that screw. It's supposed to go clockwise around the screw, but they have it going counterclockwise around the screw. The problem is when you go to tighten that screw down, it's going to want to loosen the wire. And sure enough, that's what happened in this red wire, because this red wire just popped off when I pulled the outlet out here to figure out why isn't this outlet working. So first of all, they didn't form the loop correctly in this red wire right there. See, it's only like a half circle, when it should be pretty much all the way around like you see here with the black one. So we're going to correct this and show you what the proper wiring should look like. So you see right there where it says strip gauge, that's how long it's supposed to be. So here's another common mistake, is they strip the wires too long. They take too much of the insulation off, and then you're going to have wires hanging out beyond the screw. So we'll turn it around here, and then there's your strip gauge. So you see how much excess wire they had on there? So we're going to have to cut that off until it's down here, until it matches that strip gauge. So just remember, here's the before picture. And there it is redone the correct direction here, so you can see they wrap clockwise around the screws.
And I went ahead and just installed a new outlet anyway, because the old one was giving us problems.
So here is an overview of what we have so far in the kitchen with the cabinets in place. And then I went ahead and installed a kitchen island there because there was enough room for it. And that island also has a pull-out kitchen trash drawer as well, which is nice. And we're going to have a large piece of granite put on the top of that. So we'll have a bar hanging off of it as well. So now you can pull up chairs to it. So here's the granite guys coming in and setting in the smaller piece of granite on the countertop next to the refrigerator panel. And that granite just matches the cabinet so perfectly. And there's a view of the refrigerator with the panel on the left side. And while we were at it, we also had them remove the old granite bar that was on the outside in the patio. And we're going to replace it with a new piece that you see there on the floor. It was laying upside down on the carpet. And they're going to put that one in. That will match what's going on inside the kitchen, so it will feed right through the window. Now, these were all laser measured, so everything is so exact that sometimes sliding these into place takes quite a bit of effort and work, and it's slow going until they can just barely get it in there, because everything was laser measured and cut and fit, and it's so exact that there's basically no room for error at all. It just simply has to fit. Then they bring in the other piece. Now you can see there's going to be a seam behind the sink, so that was the best place to put the seam because you'll barely notice it, because remember, the faucet will be right there where the seam is. And so here they got to slide it down into place here. Again, with these exact measurements, it can be a real pain, and they have to make sure it absolutely perfectly slides all the way in there to make this fit right. So they'll cajole it around a little bit, but look at the end result, just very nice. So there's where the seam is going to be. And now we're going to join it in a moment here with this special machine that they have, which is really cool. And so here's the giant granite that I told you about that we put over the kitchen island there. And I believe we had either a 12-inch or a 14-inch overhang on this bar. So here they are using their granite joining machine, and this is pretty cool. It's got two gigantic suction cups, and it vibrates both of the panels and slowly sucks them together hydraulically until they absolutely meet and they're touching. That's something that they do in their workshop. You can barely are matching to the granite there, and they'll just go ahead and keep it in there until it's completely level and flush with the surface, and then hopefully you don't see much of a seam. And then so now what you're looking at is they're trying to get the window to shut there, and then here I'm putting glue on the island because I'm going to put that panel on there, and then I'll also brad nail it around the edges, and then I'll cover it up with a corner detail piece so you don't see it. And man, don't even get me started with glass tiling. If you've never tiled before, I would highly suggest you hire somebody with a lot of experience to do this, because I guarantee you that you will be ill-equipped. But if you do decide to take it on yourself, hey, use lasers directly. You let them rest on the spacers. And so here for the curdy metal edges, and so you mash it into the thin, and then you just take your trowel there and you trowel it all the way down there. Let it fill in all of those holes that are on there, and the surface tension will keep it sucked into place. Once it's in place, you can make all of your adjustments. You can put a laser on it's vertical. You can put a level on it to make sure it's vertical, what you want to do. I just do into so that I can just put one tile on there, seeing a mess around that tile to stove, and see how the tiles don't counter. I almost a little bit off of this counter there, and you make sure it's up against the Schluter metal edge guards there on the corner, and I keep adjusting them to make sure that the tiles are completely perfectly level. Because if you're off even a 1/16 of an inch here or an 1/8 of an inch, by the time you get to the other end of the wall, you could be off by 1/4 of an inch or more, depending on how long your wall is. So it's just very careful. You get these on there, you mash them into place, and you must have a glass cutting blade, a very high-end glass cutting blade. Don't try to use your regular tile cutting blades to cut glass, because it won't work. It will simply chip them. And forget about trying to use one of those scoring, sliding tile cutter saws, because they'll simply just chip the glass. It needs to be cut with a wheel. And then after that, I was off to lunch again. I seem to be eating a lot, don't I? And so this side of the sink is looking pretty good there. And then as we pan around and look over here, we started the other side. And we've done the first layer all the way across, and you can see where the stove goes there. We have some of that edge guard, and then there's more edge guard here on the side of the cabinets by the window. So we're going to be putting some smaller pieces of cut tile there. And then we have some supports under the edge guard by the oven so that we could lay that first layer of tiles down. So here you can see the laser beam should be able to stay level and go around the corner. It should wrap the corner and still stay right in that grout line and come all the way across the wall. And there's how it looks on the finished corner by the window. It looks very nice, and you can see how sometimes you have to put spacers all over the place to get some sort of funky hold in place. These tiles just want to go everywhere. And when you cut holes for your switches and outlets, make sure the holes are not too big. You want to have the tabs on the outlets still be able to grab them. Now this is that corner piece detail I told you about that I'm going to put on the corner of my kitchen island. So I'm adding my PL adhesive to it, and now we're just going to apply it to the corner. Okay, so now we're going to put this down here. Now watch as it covers the brad nail hole right there at the top of the screen. Boom, see that? And you just push it in till it mashes into place, and again, the surface tension should suck it in place and hold it for you. And then it'll dry in basically an hour or so. It'll be fully cured. Now it's time to do the crown molding on top. And whenever I do that, I always call my good friend Vinny. He's really good with woodworking.
My cousin Vinny.
So we like to pre-assemble all of our cuts on the ground to make sure they're perfect miters. And then we glue them and staple them together. And then we install the completed assembly up top so that it's just absolutely perfect, and all the corners and all of the edges line up so it just looks perfect, textbook. So we just systematically go down the line making these cuts and installing them on top there, fitting them, making sure they're okay, and then we'll brad nail them up to the top of the cabinets. And we usually do this with a smaller crown stapler. And then this is the trim piece to cover the gap from the back of the cabinet to the wall, because the wall was leaning back almost an inch up near the very top. And let me tell you, man, doing your planning ahead of time, getting the pieces all cut and attached ahead of time so you can just put up one big piece of crown molding really makes all the difference in the world. And you make sure everything is absolutely perfect, that the spacing is right, that the crown flushes to the front of the cabinet door. I mean, just everything before we staple it into place. The only thing left now is my friends need to call in painters and flooring installers. And what do you think of this final product here? So this kitchen has a new island that I put in the middle there with a large granite countertop and an overhang bar so that it made the kitchen much more functional. And of course we added all of the hardware on there as well. The flooring's not in yet because they are still fighting with the insurance company and talking to different flooring contractors to come in to put laminate flooring in. The laminate flooring you will install, and it goes up against the cabinets. You never want to put your cabinets on top of laminate flooring. And now as we take scope of our work, we think about what it looked like before or after the flood damage and what it looks like now, from an old kitchen to a nice modern beauty. And then we took this open area right here and we turned it into a beautiful kitchen island, very functional, with a large bar on top of it. And then as you look again here at the old sink area by the window and take a look at what it looks like now, it's just a night and day difference here. And then we added a farmhouse sink as the owner wanted us to add a little bit of country flair. Now over at my friend Brad's house, we did this incredible engineering project that I want you to see in his kitchen, where we did double-decker upper cabinets and a massive refrigerator in the corner at a 45-degree angle, and how we tied everything together and made this one incredible engineering project. So you can check that video out right over here. And then also I have another video for you to check out right down here on how to install those nice new round LED kitchen lights up in your kitchen ceiling there, how to cut the holes and run the wire and everything. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see all of you on the next one.